her birthday parade, the Queen surrounds herself with horses. And that's the way she likes it all year round.
The unspoken rule at Buckingham Palace was that the Queen's private passions followed this order. Horses, dogs, husband and kids.
Like mother, like daughter.
Prince Philip once famously said of Princess Anne, if it doesn't fart or eat hay, she's not interested.
Next in line for royal affection are dogs, which dine like kings.
It was rabbit on Monday, it was chicken on Tuesday, it was beef on Wednesday.
And a royal Cocker Spaniel enjoys status equal to a baby prince.
William and Kate see Luho as part of the family. He's not just a dog.
Oh, what an interception by Prince Harry!
They all love animals, and they like shooting them too.
Princess Diana said to me once, it's ironic, isn't it, that Prince Philip is the patron of the World Wildlife Fund, and yet he spends half of his time killing things.
They're country folk, and country people do love hunting, shooting and fishing. It's just part and parcel of their sort of Downton Abbey existence.
Days end at Buckingham Palace, and the kitchen is catering to resident VIPs who like to eat early.
The royal chef has a menu for the whole week for the dogs. They'll have fillet steak, they'll have breast of chicken, only the white meat.
The chicken we'd actually cut into little brunoise, small dice.
Side orders vary according to the dog's taste.
Some of the dogs would be having rice, some of the dogs would be having cabbage. I sometimes think that we had to take more care of the dogs than the royal kings, queens and presidents that came to stay with us.
It's a footman's job to deliver the feast to the Queen's quarters by 5 p.m. In time for quality control from a monarch who tolerates no reheated food for her dogs.
I think the Queen used to smell each of the dishes to make sure the meat was fresh. If ever she found a chicken bone or a big piece of gristle meat or fat, we get a quite rude note down to the kitchen.
If she's satisfied, Elizabeth II lovingly douses each dog dish with a very special gravy.
It's a secret ingredient known only to the Queen, not even to the royal chef.
Supper begins by royal assent only.
The Corgis all wait until the Queen gives them permission to eat.
Feeding the dogs might seem like an odd pastime for Her Majesty, but it's often more exciting than her day job.
I was at an event just a week or two ago at Buckingham Palace, and the Queen was surrounded by an army of loyal subjects, sycophantically hanging on her every word. She looked pretty bored to me. You just knew she wanted to head off in the car to Windsor for the weekend and spend it with her dogs and her horses.
When you've got as many dogs as the Queen, you need people like Paul Burrell to help you. The former personal footman to Her Majesty says it was his way with animals which got him his job in the first place.
The first question the Queen would ask, do you like dogs? Do you like horses? And if you did, you got on famously well with the Queen. In my time, the Queen had 9 Corgis and 1 Labrador living with her in her apartments at Buckingham Palace. Can you imagine? Brush, Shadow, Smokey, Jolly, Socks, Chipper, Piper and Kelpie, with her old shooting dog, Jade. Prince Philip, on many occasions, tried to get into the Queen's room. He'd come bumbling through, shouting and cursing. These bloody animals always in the way. Why do you have so many animals? And calmly the Queen would turn to him and say, but darling, they're so collectible.
Like it or not, Burrell was on call for the Queen's collectibles, good weather or bad.
She'd ring her bell, I'd go to her room and she'd say, you wouldn't like to take the dogs out, would you? Of course I'd love to take the dogs out, Your Majesty, who wouldn't?
After their walkies, the cushy life for the Corgis continues when they bed down for the night in custom-made kennels.
All the dogs have their own mini palaces, and they're all on 4-inch legs so that they won't get a draft coming in under them. They have a bed of straw inside, which makes it very, very comfortable there.
At Windsor Castle, one Corgi had it even better than the others, courtesy of the Queen's footman. He invited the only male dog, called Chipper, into his bed after putting the 8 females in theirs.
After dinner, the Queen would come up to check to see if I put them in their right beds. And she'd be in evening dress and tiara, and she'd walk along the corridor, go in to see the girls, and then she'd come in to see Chipper. So on many occasions, the Queen of England was stood in my bedroom in her finest, petting her Corgi on my bed.
There's something very therapeutic, I think, at the end of the day, stroking that lovely soft fur and just letting the strains and stresses of the day just dissipate.
The Queen has doted on Corgis since her dad got the family Dookie when she was just a girl. The King gave her her own dog, Susan, when the princess turned 18. Elizabeth was so attached to her first Corgi that she brought her along on her honeymoon. There's no record of what Prince Philip thought of this. Some 30 of the Queen's pets are descended from Susan. The occasional Dorgie was produced by crossing a small dachshund with a hefty Corgi.
When the Queen was asked, how on earth do you mate a Corgi with a dachshund, she replied with the straightest of faces, we stand one of them on a brick.
Come on.
For a sovereign constantly on public display, life can be lonely. Elizabeth's dogs, of which she's had up to a dozen at a time, are a welcome respite from fawning courtiers and palace politics.
They can't answer back. They will never have an opinion. They will never spill a secret. Through her dogs, she has a companionship that she can't enjoy with an actual person, largely for fear of not being able to trust everyone.
Prince William has been a huge dog fan since he was a boy and doted on one Labrador in particular.
Widgeon was a present from Diana on William's 16th birthday, and William was devastated and absolutely heartbroken when Widgeon died.
2 years after losing his Labrador, the prince gave a black Cocker Spaniel pup named Lupo to Kate for her 30th birthday. She loved it almost too much for her husband's taste.
I heard that William was a bit jealous of Lupo. He thought that Kate was so devoted that when William came back at the end of the shift, he'd find Kate curled up in bed with Lupo, and of course, that was William's place.
Tabloid magazine stirred the pot when it named Lupo one of the 50 most fascinating people in Britain. All the attention has made Cocker Spaniels so popular, they're now the most stolen dogs in the UK. It's hardly the first time the royals have started a 4-legged fad in this canine-crazed country. Early in the 17th century, young Charles II championed a dog which became wildly popular in Britain. The Cavalier King Charles Spaniel, as it became known, served triple function as companion, lap warmer, and flea attractor. The king even issued a proclamation allowing the spaniel access to all public places, including the Houses of Parliament. The breed's popularity lasted more than 200 years into Queen Victoria's reign, when the monarch had her spaniel Dash immortalized on canvas beside her pet parrot. Corgis eventually eclipsed spaniels in Britain when the Queen Mother and her daughter turned the snappy dog, bred to herd cattle, into the ultimate royal pet. But somebody forgot to tell palace servants why the dogs are so popular.
They're the most disliked and pampered pooches on earth. They are universally loathed by every member of the royal household.
Maids and valets use carbonated water and blotting paper to clean up after the Corgis, who aren't properly house-trained. Virtually all staff give them a wide berth at the best of times.
The royal servants find them quite vicious and difficult to deal with, and there's been a number of occasions when they've been bitten quite badly by these dogs.
One of the royal chefs had a close call with the Queen's dogs at an idyllic spot near Balmoral Castle. At first, Darren McGrady was ecstatic to see the monarch walking towards him by the River Dee.
I thought, this is it. Me and the Queen of England just talking together. This is going to be so much fun. I can't wait to call my parents and tell them. But as I got closer, the Queen's Corgis saw me, and all of them started barking and running towards me. I was so scared I just turned and ran.
The ignominy of being chased away from Her Majesty by a pack of yapping corgis didn't stop the young chef from trying to befriend them. But the dogs were hard to love when they romped around the royal kitchen at lunchtime.
We always knew the Queen was ready for her lunch when she would open the door and push the dogs out of the dining room and into the kitchen. But the problem was for the chefs, we got the food there and we were trying to work around them and step over them. We couldn't push them out of the way or anything because we were too scared they would yelp and the Queen would come in the kitchen and say, who's hitting my dogs?
One chef who'd been pestered for years by the Queen's pooches finally lost it with Prince Charles's Jack Russell Tigger, who took a run at some food in the kitchen. The extraordinary scene of palace staff fighting back was witnessed by Princess Diana's bodyguard.
The chef saw it coming, put the pan down, grabbed hold of Tigger by the neck. And he opens the heater drawer and puts the dog in the oven. And so I said, you be careful, you can't do that. He said, no, it's all right, he's just warming it up. At which point, the Prince of Wales comes in. And we all stood up and said, morning, Royal Highness. He said, oh, he said, morning. He said, has anyone seen Tigger? And you can't say he's in the oven, sir. You can't do that. We said, no, he's in the garden. And he said, oh, he said, I'm sure he came in here. And he went outside and there was a gardener tying up some roses or something. And he said, have you seen Tigger? Oh, he said in this Gloucester accent, oh, he's in the kitchen, sir. Which time I said, get the dog out of the oven. So that Tigger was taken out of the oven, by which now Tigger was fairly rough-haired as a breed. Now he's immaculately soft-haired, smooth-skinned, very hot. You can only just touch the dog. So we moved the dog and he's alive, he's a bit shaky. And then the prince came in and then said, oh, Tigger, there you are. You look amazingly hot.
Household staff could take the occasional covert swipe at a royal dog, but nobody could afford to diss one anywhere near the Queen.
There was an elderly gentleman who was at Sandringham House in Norfolk, and he accidentally kicked one of the Queen's corgis, and the thing hit him on the ankle. And he said to the Queen, dear God, what does he want to bite me for? Isn't he useless? He went after tea up to his room and found his bag had been packed, and a taxi had been called for him. He was out.
Ordinary people, it seems, aren't on the same level as royal dogs, even when the canines bare their fangs at young children. Take the shocking story of Princess Anne's bull terrier, Dottie.
The Princess Royal today became the first member of the royal family to have a criminal record.
It all started in Windsor Great Park with the Queen's daughter exercising her dogs. One of them slipped the leash and charged two young boys.
Dottie hit them rather savagely and indeed frightened them to death, and their parents decided to sue.
Guilty was the only verdict possible, but the royals pulled out all the stops to save Dottie.
They brought the Queen's animal psychologist to give evidence for Dottie and for the princess, and he said it was in the animal's psyche that he would normally be expected to attack. That's what a bull terrier does. That's why they have to be controlled. The magistrate said in that case, we won't order it to be destroyed. However, it must go on an anger management course. There is no evidence whatsoever that the princess ever complied with this order.
The offense could have seen Anne go to jail for up to 6 months, but instead, she was given a £500 fine, a mere slap on the wrist. The parents, whose boys had been bitten on their arms and legs, called the judgment immoral and unjust.
The fact is, if that had been an ordinary member of the public and not Princess Anne, the Queen's daughter, there's no way that dog wouldn't have been put down. It sort of shows you that the royals maybe think that animals are more important than children.
Wherever you find royals, you find horses.
The Queen cannot remember a time when she couldn't ride.
The noble steed raises his monarch above the masses and projects power.
If you look through history, whenever there has been a victory, it's usually and historically been on horseback.
Woe betide the unmounted monarch. "My kingdom for a horse," cries Shakespeare's Richard III, who was thrown to the ground and killed in the Battle of Bosworth. Today's royals prove their mettle racing carriages. or astride their horses on the polo pitch.
Charles loved the energetic release of being on a thoroughbred horse, and he's passed that passion on to William and Harry.
But the true sport of kings is thoroughbred racing, or make that the sport of queens. A woman famous for controlling her emotions can't help herself when it comes to watching a horse race.
If you want to see the Queen happy, just go to the races. Her face is alive, her eyes are lit up, she's beaming with a smile, and she loves it. She absolutely loves it. She knows all the breeding, she knows all the runners, she knows all the owners, all the riders. It's her real passion.
Back at the palace, horses are still on the Queen's mind from the moment she gets up.
First paper that she'll read is the Racing Post. The front pages used to be faxed to wherever she was in the world, so she could read up on the form.
When unable to watch a race at the track, Her Majesty keeps her ear glued to the radio.
She's listening for her horse, and no one dare go in her room when you hear that voice booming out. So we're going in now into the final straight, and the Queen's stallion is now head off the front. He's 1 furlong away from the Queen starts to get excited, and she starts to jump up and down. The corgis start to bark. Prince Philip starts to shout, and there's this whole atmosphere that you would never ever believe inside Buckingham Palace.
It's easy to see where the Queen got her passion for the races. Her mother couldn't get enough of them, rooting for her horses and dreaming of a jackpot, which proved elusive. One of the Queen Mother's most heartbreaking losses came in 1956 at the grueling Grand National Steeplechase. Her champion horse, Devon Loch, was in the lead just meters from the finish.
A shoe-in victory evaporated when, with 60 feet to go, the royal entry Devon Loch stumbled and fell. ESP romps home the winner. Devon Loch set a...
That's racing, said the famously stoic Elizabeth, whose monument on the Mall shows her congratulating a jockey. He may well have won on a horse she bet against.
I think the Queen Mother was one of those people that when she won big would think, oh, this is good, but she would not really recognise that she'd lost over the years from putting on bad bets.
Hope sprang eternal for the aging Queen, who, like her daughter, would follow the races wherever she was. Even at a country residence where the only TV available was one used by the chauffeurs in a dirty garage.
Suddenly, there's a knock on the door, and it's the Queen Mother's butler. And he said, right, he said, stand aside, Her Majesty wants to watch the 2:30 at Lingfield. She says, I'm sorry about this. She says, but I got a horse running in the 2:30. So we all stood up, sort of got a chair round, and the lady sat down and sort of put her specs on and watched the 2:30 at Lingfield. None of us dare ask her which horse it was. And then we said, oh, did it win, Your Majesty? No, it didn't. Got up and disappeared.
The Queen Mother's betting addiction scandalized some Britons when the extent of her losses finally became public.
When she died, she had an overdraft at Coutts, the bank, of £4 million. That's a lot of money, and a lot of it was run up at the bookmakers.
The Queen has had much more success with horses than her mother. She studied thoroughbred bloodlines for decades and bred the winners of more than 1,600 races at home and abroad.
She's not there just for the taking part. She's there to win.
Elizabeth II has triumphed in all the British classics except for the Epsom Derby, one of the oldest and most prestigious races in the world. Her Majesty still dreams of creating a horse to conquer it.
She knows that a horse has to be bred specifically for the Derby, for the distance. The Queen has tables and tables and tables, and she studies them. She looks at the lineage, where the horses come from, how fast they performed. She looks at everything.
But the chances of the Queen ever winning the Derby are getting slimmer by the day, courtesy of wealthier monarchs in the Middle East.
The major players are the sheikhs and the Qataris, and they do it on a massive, massive scale. And the Queen has something like 30 to 40 horses in training. They have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds.
When not racing horses, the Queen loves that heady mix of speed, exercise, and fresh air, which comes from riding them. The monarch adds a dash of risk by shunning a protective hat in favor of a scarf.
A lot of people from various safety organizations have begged her, said, "Please, Your Majesty, will you show an example?" She ignores them.
The Queen is the only person I could ever put on our front cover not wearing a hat. I don't think there's anybody amongst our readership or amongst the British public who would dare criticise her.
The lifelong love affair between Elizabeth and her horses even extends to the animals that pull her carriages on grand occasions.
Even now, she can go into the Royal Mews at Buckingham Palace, where there are 30 Windsor Greys. She knows everyone by name, and they all recognise her. They all perk up as if, oh, here comes the Queen. We know her.
Her Majesty knows that the way to a horse's heart is through its stomach and instructs her chefs accordingly. Darren McGrady learned that on his first day in the royal kitchens.
And the head chef called me over and he said, "Darren, come in the kitchen. I want to show you how to prepare carrots for the Queen." So I thought, well, that's strange. I know how to do carrots. And he took 3 carrots and he peeled them. And then he cut them all finger length and into little perfect pieces this size. And then he patted them down and looked and trimmed them again. And then a big pile of them, he put them into a little paper sack and then creased the sack. And I said, "Chef, that's a lot of carrots for the Queen." He said, "Oh, no, not exactly for the Queen. They're for the Queen's horse."
There's one royal who would never have asked her chef to prepare anything for a 4-legged friend because she had none.
Princess Diana loathed animals. She liked clothes and fashion, and she loved the company of people.
Diana's distaste for one animal in particular was to have dire repercussions in her marriage.
As a young girl, the princess was bitten by a horse, and she had a natural aversion to horses. She tried very hard to come to terms with that, and did take riding lessons, but in her heart, it just wasn't her.
She never really enjoyed being at the royal residences, and she certainly never enjoyed being around horses. Charles always referred to her as a pavement person.
That trait was bound to clash with a husband who was very much a polo person.
Diana complained endlessly that Charles was always off to polo.
But there was more to Diana's aversion to this sport than the horses themselves. Lurking in the stands somewhere would be Charles's very horsey mistress, Camilla Parker Bowles.
One of the main reasons I think that Diana really didn't like polo was always the fear of actually seeing and watching Camilla be there as well, which she was on many occasions.
As Diana famously said, "There were 3 of us in this marriage, and that wasn't even counting the horses."
I think the whole equestrian arena had far too many affiliations with Camilla Parker Bowles. Camilla used to ride with Charles, she used to hunt with Charles, she used to be there at the polo matches when Charles was playing. So I think Diana felt that there wasn't really a place for her within that particular domain, and I think that exacerbated any reluctance to be around horses in the first place.
Elizabeth II's affinity for horses has made her passionate about stopping the cruel practice of breaking them in with brute force. And led to one of her closest and most enduring friendships with a gentle Californian they call the Horse Whisperer.
She had instructors for her riding that said, "Just give him a good whack with that whip." I don't think she was comfortable with that. What she saw was that I could do the things that they all wanted to do with horses, and I could do them without any violence or force. It just captivated her.
The Queen invited Monty to work on her own horses when she first heard about him in the early 1980s. As their friendship grew, she encouraged him to write a book which sold 5 million copies and changed practices around the world.
The methods used on horses for 6,000 years were you do what I tell you to or I'll hurt you. So we need the horse to understand that we're not there to cause them pain. And once you prove it to them, they'll be your friend because they've found a friend and they're looking for a friend.
A quarter century after they met, Monty still visits the Queen every year and wows English equestrian fans with his horse handling skills. Spooked animals quickly fall under Monty's spell. Within 30 minutes, horse and human are at ease together, a transformation which would have taken most trainers weeks. Monty's magic so impresses the Queen that she's even been known to interrupt state visits to talk shop with him over the phone.
The Queen simply said, "You call anytime you want." It's amazing that through all these years, there's never been a time that I didn't get through. It's not really me, it's what horses are and what they mean to her. She deeply loves horses. She realizes through Monty, I can really help horses.
Of all the Queen's mounts, there's none she loved more than Burmese, a black Canadian mare born and bred in Saskatchewan. The province commissioned this statue to commemorate the star of the Mounties' famous musical ride, given to the Queen in 1969. The attraction was immediate and mutual. Within weeks of her arrival in England, Burmese was showcased to the world, carrying Elizabeth II during the Trooping of the Colour. For 18 consecutive years, the monarch would ride no other horse for her birthday parade.
Burmese was the Queen's favourite. She absolutely adored this beautiful animal.
Her Majesty famously chose Burmese when she hacked through Windsor Park with US President Ronald Reagan. But it was a scary moment in 1981 when blank shots were fired at the Queen that brought horse and rider closest together.
Curtin with the Grenadier Guards. Behind her.
The horse was startled, but the Queen managed to retain a sense of calm, and I think that was because she felt safe on that horse. She knew that she was going to be protected by that horse, and she was completely confident on horseback.
17-year-old Marcus Sargent, who said he wanted to be famous, was jailed under the Treason Act. Undeterred, the Queen rode Burmese for another 5 birthdays until putting her out to pasture in 1987. She was gone, but not replaced. For the Trooping of the Colour, the Queen has ridden in a carriage ever since. Her Majesty's faithful mare was given the ultimate honour when she died at 28. She was buried in the grounds of Windsor Castle. Since the Middle Ages, British kings and queens have owned much more than dogs and horses. For centuries, the monarchy held rights to almost all the beasts of the forest and punished commoners who dared poach them. British royals even had a monopoly on the most graceful bird in the land.
It seems to be a quirky English thing. The Crown claimed ownership of all the swans in the country. They refer to the birds as being royal birds.
Astonishingly, the monarchy still owns virtually all the swans in Britain and keeps track of them in the 9-century-old tradition of swan-upping, recently attended by the Seigneur of the Swans herself. Every July, on a stretch of the Thames close to Windsor Castle, boatmen for the Queen spend 5 days chasing and capturing broods. The swans are checked for disease, and the cygnets are weighed, tagged, and tallied. Luckily for the royal birds, their owner no longer wants to dine on them, and regular folk are forbidden to do so. Nobody's missing much, apparently.
There's a guy called Ray who was very, very rude about them and said that it was a horrible meat and they wouldn't have been considered any delicacy were it not for the royal connections.
But the magnificent birds add luster to the crown, which has a special interest in keeping them on this river.
The saying is that when the swans leave the Thames, the monarchy will disappear.
Her Majesty's loyal bird catchers are working hard to make sure that never happens during Elizabeth's reign.
The Queen! Queen!
Not satisfied with owning just the birds and beasts of their realm, in the Middle Ages, the royals began collecting exotic animals abroad. They locked them up in the Tower of London, where many enemies of the crown came to a sad end. Malnourished and confined to cramped quarters, the animals provided entertainment for king and courtiers.
There were baboons, bears, boa constrictors, ostriches, elephants.
A sculpture reminds visitors of a polar bear chained up in the tower in the 13th century, a gift from the King of Norway to Henry III.
The keeper would have walked him down to the edge of the Thames here so he could go fishing for his supper. At the time, the Thames was teeming with salmon, and he would have also had a little swim and a bath while he was there.
Other wild beasts had it tougher. For the monarch's pleasure, they fought each other to the death. One captive primate at sea rebelled against his destiny of becoming a plaything for the royals.
A baboon that was being shipped to the Tower threw a 9-pound cannon shot at a sailor boy and killed him.
Ordinary Londoners were eventually allowed in to gawk at the beasts in what became known as the Royal Menagerie.
They would have been absolutely gobsmacked to see these animals. They were some of the first of their kind ever to be seen in England.
In the early 19th century, after a monkey bit a soldier and a wolf escaped, the menagerie was closed and the animals sent to what is now the London Zoo. Royals no longer take pleasure in caging wild beasts, but they have no qualms about killing them with a little help from local game wardens. Balmoral, Her Majesty's 50,000-acre estate in Scotland, is a deer hunter's paradise.
It's best not to be a wild animal at Balmoral.
Acquired by Queen Victoria in the mid-19th century, the estate provided targets galore for her hunting fanatic husband, Albert. Like royals before him, there was no better way of proving he was top of the food chain than by killing things below him. Prince Philip is Albert's worthy successor.
He has probably killed more animals than any other member of the royal family. He thinks animals are there to be shot.
It's manly. It's getting out there. It's showing you can do it. In a way, Prince Philip's career was taken away from him, and he was dumbed down by becoming the Queen's husband. In this masculine, aggressive field of hunting, shooting, killing, he can take back the fact that he's the boss.
Hunting at Balmoral is not for the faint of heart.
When the men are going out after a stag in all winds and weathers, if anybody says, "Oh, I don't think I'll go today, looks a bit cold and all the rest of it," their bags would be packed and they would be dispatched from the castle straight away and never asked back again. And they will stalk a stag all day. When they shot the stag, they had to kill it with one shot. If they wounded it, it was a great disgrace.
The Prince of Wales is a chip off the old block when it comes to hunting, but never managed to pass his passion on to his first wife.
Although Diana didn't particularly like any form of animal cruelty, shooting or otherwise, she was virtually persuaded to go.
The princess hated stalking stag in the damp heather with midges buzzing at her ears, and the initiation ceremony horrified her.
I can remember the princess coming back absolutely aghast. She was so upset this animal had been killed and that she'd been covered in its blood. But it is royal tradition, a blooding.
The royals can never be accused of wasting what they kill. The bounty is aged to perfection in Her Majesty's larders and served up on grand occasions.
Prince Philip loves nothing more than at a dinner party to say, "What you're eating on your plate, I shot." Whether it be a snipe or a grouse or a pheasant, or a great hunk of venison. He'll always say, "This came from my estate. I killed that."
William and Harry had an early introduction to Windsor blood sport when, still in primary school, they got their first BB guns, and anything was fair game.
They had great fun shooting the squirrels. It wasn't great fun when Princess Michael of Kent's cat came into view. That was naughty.
The young princes soon graduated to more serious prey, much to their mother's displeasure.
She loathed the fact that Prince Charles was taking her son shooting. Prince Andrew took Prince Harry shooting when he was 6 years old. Princess Diana was outraged.
But the boys were hooked on guns. They were soon bagging pheasant with their father and dozens of friends he'd invite to his shooting parties.
The beaters would beat up the pheasants. They'd rise like helicopters to the top of this wood, then fly over the ploughed field, and there the shooters, the Prince of Wales's guests with their guns would take aim.
The Duke of Cambridge passed on his passion for shooting to his future queen while dating her at university.
By all accounts, Kate's now actually a very good shot, and she really enjoys it.
But it seems William went a step too far for his brother's 27th birthday, spending £10,000 to buy Harry 250 duck, partridge, and pheasant to shoot. One of the world's best-known animal rights activists wrote the Duchess of Cambridge begging her to intervene.
I appealed to her to please say, no, let's celebrate life, let's celebrate Harry's life, and let's not kill to do so.
Harry and friends shot the birds anyway in what one newspaper critic called some kind of foppish parody of an ancient Roman festival.
I think that was so extraordinarily insensitive, so wasteful of life, so disappointing, and I hope that things will change in the future.
The Windsors were forced to change a decade ago when the Labour government introduced legislation to ban fox hunting, a blue-blooded sport which Oscar Wilde called the unspeakable in pursuit of the inedible.
It unleashed turmoil up and down the land.
In the largest march on London since the 19th century, 450,000 country folk and aristocrats protested that they were being robbed of their age-old right to hunt fox. Demonstrators were delighted to see the young princes on the roof of the palace.
So a lot of thumbs up to the boys because the marchers knew William and Harry were saying, we're on your side.
After a long and acrimonious debate in Parliament, Prime Minister Tony Blair used his majority to push through the bill.
In his memoirs, he said he'd have got into less trouble if he'd euthanised every fifth pensioner in Great Britain.
British foxes may now be safer, but the carnage in the air continues.
The royals have always been into blasting birds out the sky. It's just part and parcel of their sort of Downton Abbey existence.
But that existence could be in jeopardy in a country which created the first humane society and where most people oppose blood sport.
We may be closer than we think for the government to say, hey, there's no more stag shooting, there's no more pheasant shooting, we need to save our animals. You're going to end hundreds and hundreds of years of royal tradition.
That would be the last thing the Windsors want in Britain. But that didn't stop Prince Charles convening a major international conference recently to stop big game poaching in Africa.
Prince William and his father recorded in Swahili, in French, Spanish, a declaration to the people of Africa, stop hunting endangered species. Before we discovered, Prince William and Prince Harry had just got back from Spain, where they'd been hunting boar, wild boar. This was a PR disaster. They were accused of crass hypocrisy, and rightly so.
As the Queen's gotten older, she's had to say goodbye to many of her pets, including a Corgi she named after the horse whisperer. Monty the dog starred alongside Her Majesty in a James Bond skit for the London Olympics, and his death made headlines around the world.
I got calls from friends everywhere saying, are you all right? What happens? They thought I was the Monty that died. And no, I'm quite alive. It's a Corgi in England.
The eyes of the Lord are on the righteous. And his
Like the canines who went before him, Monty was buried on royal ground with the Queen in attendance.
People in the household go, they say a little prayer for the soul of the dog, because the Queen, just like Queen Victoria, believes that her animals, her dogs in particular, have souls.
Her Majesty no longer replaces her deceased pets, raising the delicate question of succession.
I don't think Charles is a huge corgi lover, and William certainly isn't. He sees them as a yapping carpet. I think we can assume that the reign of the corgi will probably pass with Queen Elizabeth.
Most favoured dog status is unlikely to fall to the Tiggers and Dotties of the Windsor dynasty. A younger generation of royal canine looks destined for the throne.
It'll become the age of Lupo. It'll become the age of the Cocker Spaniel. They're already far more popular than ever before, and quite a lot of people, when they get their Cocker Spaniel, they call them Kate or William. We're so deferential, you know.
The young Windsors still love their polo ponies, but they've raised some eyebrows over their indifference to racehorses.
There's a little bit of concern that there isn't further down the ladder that same real passion for racing in particular, and horses in general.
But the royals will always keep noble beasts for special occasions, and they've certainly no plans to stop shooting something for dinner.
The fact that they're killing things is neither here nor there to them. They really don't care. That's part of their life.
For all their contradictions, the future kings and queens of England will likely go on loving their pets for the same reason Her Majesty always has.
I once asked the Queen why she had such a passion for animals. Do you know what she said to me? Paul, it's quite simple. Animals give me love unconditionally. A wagging dog's tail or a wet nose is much more pleasing to the Queen than a supercilious courtier.